10% is the difference between the winners and the losers. When you break it down into watching the behaviors of the top performers and contrasting that to the behavior of the variables, you've got to overcome the head trash that the time between Thanksgiving Day and New Year's Day is a wash. It's a battle between your ears. And for salespeople and for sales leaders alike, don't poo-poo the idea that we can sell a lot of stuff in the fourth quarter. There's no reason to have that scarcity mindset.
Hey, good morning. I have Tim Barry here. Tim, you've been training salespeople for years at Sandler. Welcome to the show. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you, Vidal. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. I'm excited about talking with you today. This is going to be great.
Great. So let's dig right in. It's Q4 now. And so, what's the most common excuse you hear from reps in Q4 that's holding them back?
Yeah, as a sales trainer and teaching a lot of salespeople, I get to hear from a multitude of different viewpoints what's happening in their sales worlds. October 1st is the beginning of Q4. And so there's this final push that every business owner is going to make to finish the year as strong as possible. There's a difference between the behaviors and the activities of a high performing salesperson than there is from someone who is a variable performer. We won't even address the low performers who have it on, cruise control and they're not really even trying. Those people are just trying. We're going to focus on the high performers and the variable performers. My background is that I have a degree in accounting, so I'm a numbers guy, but maybe not in the way that a lot of people would think. I don't sit there and crunch numbers and then hold salespeople accountable to what's your year-end number. What I look for is the number of activities and the percentage of your time that you're spent hunting. And here's what I have found to be fascinating in my 10 years of training salespeople. The difference between a top performer, someone who hits their goals and bonuses out, and the variable performers is right around 10%. Here's what I
10%.
also find to be, yeah, it's 10%. 10% is the difference between the winners and the losers. When you break it down into watching the behaviors of the top performers and contrasting that to the behavior of the variables, here's what it comes down to. I find it interesting that there are 33 days between Thanksgiving Day and New Year's Day. When you do the math, when you divide 33 into 365, oddly enough, that number is 9.04%. What I find the top performers do in that last 33 days of the year is they don't make excuses. They don't mail it in for the rest of the year. They don't have excuses for, oh, we're in the holidays now and so we can't go out there and prospect. We can't do the cold calls. We can't do the networking events. Nobody's doing business anymore. The top performers double down and they're going Mach 2 with their hair on fire to finish the year strong. By contrast, the variable performers in that same 33 days will make excuses because they'll say, oh, everybody's got holiday parties and they've got holiday head and all this other stuff. And I do find that that's one of the interesting differences between the two.
What's going on typically in the buyer's mind in Q4 that maybe salespeople don't realize that they should ask about? What opportunities are they missing?
Yeah, I think that, when your buyers are like, look, this is the end of the year, and some of them will be talking to salespeople because they want to get started right at the beginning of the new year. But just as importantly, an area where I think the variable performing salesperson misses is that there's a lot of budgets that don't get used by the end of the year. And so the abundant mindset would be, hey, look, maybe you don't have a sales training budget left for 2025, but what other budgets could you raid and grab resources from where you could get a 33-day head start on training, for example? Oftentimes are not really even thinking that they could raid some other budget that's not going to get used, right? Maybe it's the HR budget, or maybe it's a marketing budget, and they have some available dollars that they can draw from that would normally expire at the end of that fiscal year, right? And so again, the buyer, if the salesperson is doing an artful job of exploring possibilities with that prospect, and they hear, well, we really don't have we're out of budget until the end of the year. Great. I totally understand that. Makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you this before we give up on the prospect of starting now and catapulting into 2026. What other budgets do you think you might be able to access and draw those resources out so we can get started now?
I
And
see.
just asking that question unlocks sections of their brain, which are, and that's what you want. You want to explore possibilities. You can't just sit there and give up and say, well, they don't have a budget until the end of the year. You don't necessarily know that. They might not have it for that specific thing, but they do have budgets other places too. So,
I see. So this is one of your tips to deal with the budget is exhausted objection, is to say, like, can we raid other budgets that maybe aren't exhausted? Do you have maybe two or three other specific techniques that people can use right now, in Q4 to create urgency, without being like super pushy, perhaps?
yeah, the top performing salespeople will tend to double down on their efforts. For example, cold calling, which nobody loves. If any salesperson ever says they love it, they got to be lying. It just can't be true. Sticking in there when everyone else quits leaves you as the victor sometimes. And I'll give you an example. This is probably 3 years ago, and we're just out of COVID. It was 2022. And there's the week between Christmas and New Year's, and a lot of people take the week off, right? Well, I was dialing for dollars, is what I call it. And it was a Thursday at like 5 p.m. And I made a cold call because I was in the middle of a prospecting block. And I called a company, and the president of the company picked up the phone. He was the only person there. And it was 5 o'clock. I kept executing the behavior over and over again. And he picked up the phone and he said, hello. And I'm like, whoa, like I'm looking for so and so. And he goes, this is him. And we proceeded to have an interesting conversation, which led to a 6-figure sale. And the thing that did the trick for him was he goes, holy smokes, this is the week between Christmas and New Year's. And you mean to tell me that you are still out there, banging the phones? And I'm like, I'm still banging the phones, man. And he goes, I really want you to teach my people how to do that, how to have that intestinal fortitude to do that. And it turned out to be a giant sale. And there's still a client to this day. And in terms of tips, is you make your own luck, right? And the challenge is that nothing is delivered to you on a platter. When you're a sales hunter, when your job is to go out and drag new logos and drag your kill home, right? You don't eat if you're not out there doing it, and you make your own luck. And that's by regular execution of behaviors, even when everybody else is, mailed it in and said, yeah, this is the end, and they have it on cruise control. When you have that go get them attitude and you are persistent and relentless in executing the prospecting behaviors, you can not only finish Q4 really strong, but then you catapult into Q5. Because again, with the same people, those variable performers that have it on cruise control in the last 33 days of the year, they also basically take the first 3 weeks of January off too. Because they're like, oh, well, now everybody's getting back from the holidays and nobody's really focused on anything. And that's just a scarcity mindset to have.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like those people just, if that's their overall attitude, they're not going to be performing very well, whether it's Q4 or you say Q1 or any Q, right? So, I'm curious, are there any certain kinds of deals or prospects that are actually easier to close in Q4 that maybe people should be prioritizing?
It yes and no, right? So the way that I teach prospecting is that you've got to look at the product or service offering that you have and the big deals. There's going to be big deals, medium deals, and little ones. And so I break everything up into animals. So a small piece of business, maybe a one call close, would be a rabbit, right? It's an easy one. It's a piece of cake, and you can go get those. The medium size piece of business might be a deer. A larger piece of business might be an elephant, and then a monster would be a whale, right? And you've got to have a strategy for all of the above, because maybe a whale may take 9 or 10 contacts or more and involve a buying team. The timeline on a whale may be a year, it could be a year, versus the rabbit, which might be an immediate one call close. And so the strategy, Q4 strategy is that your sales strategy has to be attuned to all of them, right? Because if you only hunt whales, you're going to starve to death because it takes a whole year to even land one of them. And if you only hunt rabbits, you're still going to starve to death because you're never going to be able to scale. It's just too much activity for the one.
Are you saying that these smaller deals, these more like rabbits and deer and stuff, are maybe those are the ones to do in Q4 because the bigger whale deals are just, you're not going to be able to get them, right? They take too long.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the easier ones, the smaller pieces of the selling process that I teach, they call it a monkey's paw. And a monkey's paw is getting the prospect to give you a small piece of business as a precursor to a much larger piece of business. So, a monkey's paw in the world of cruise ships, for example, is the knot that they tie at the end of a rope. And when a cruise ship comes into port, you've got those giant ropes that they need to connect to the dock. Well, you can't throw those ropes, but you can take a little rope, tie a knot at the end of it, and throw that monkey's paw out to somebody standing on the dock. And then once the person on the dock catches the monkey's paw, then they drag the rest of that big rope in, right? That's how you moor a giant cruise ship. Well, salespeople can do that same thing. So, for example, say you've got $100,000 piece of business and the prospect can't do it yet because it's not in the budget for 2025, but you can offer them that monkey's paw, right? You can get them to give you, $7,500 to do a smaller engagement and get used to not only doing business with you, but then you get to perform, right? You get to lock in and drag that bigger piece of business across the finish line by doing that. Does that make more sense now?
We have a lot of sales leaders that we talk to. Do you have any coaching advice for sales leaders specific to Q4 to help them
Yep.
motivate their team to
Yep.
finish the year strong?
1,000%. For the sales leader, if you're running a sales team, don't focus as much on the dollar amount. Focus on the execution of the winning prospecting behaviors that close the business in the first place. So, for example, the amount of prospecting behaviors that they do are the leading indicator of what's about to happen. The actual sales dollar amount, the closed amount, that's the lagging indicator. And so for a sales leader, I would be paying attention not necessarily to the dollar amount of sales. The guy hit 30 home runs every year, but the problem was is that he only hit like 150. He struck out like 200 times a year and whatever, but 30 times a year he was hitting a homer and everybody was excited about it. And that's not really what you want for a winning team, right? If you get 2 whales a year, you might hit your number, but if that's all you're getting and you're not bringing anything else, it's a milk toast performance, right? You got lucky by getting 2 home runs in a season. So for the sales leader, I would say look at and measure and hold your team accountable to the activity, the prospecting activities that they are executing. For example, I know that for sure you've got to be, if you're going to have a scaling, growing sales business, you've got to be executing about 4.5 hours per day of hunting prospecting activity. So that's 3 90-minute blocks in the course of an 8-hour day. And so I would be looking, how are your sales team executing that? What are they doing in terms, how many networking events are they going to? And how are they making connections that are producing results? How many cold calls are they making? What are they doing? And how many proposals are they giving out? And if you measure those things and hold your team accountable to the execution of the winning prospecting behaviors, the numbers are going to follow. But the leading indicator is how I would recommend it. If it's fourth quarter, get them to double down on the activities.
Well, yeah, let me ask about that because this is stuff, behaviors they should be doing all year, right? Like they should be prospecting all year, making cold calls, outreach, going to networking events. So in the fourth quarter, is basically what you're saying that people should be doubling down on this rather than easing up on it?
100%. There's no way to get out of this. You've got to overcome the head trash that the time between Thanksgiving Day and New Year's Day is a wash. And it does, when you look at the psychology of salespeople across a wide spectrum, you will find that there is a distinct difference between a high performer that hits their numbers and a variable performer who does not. And that's exactly the difference between an actual high performer who makes their number and somebody who does not. And so you've got to overcome that head trash that, oh, this is just the holidays and people aren't buying at this point. It's not true. There's tons of GDP that gets transacted in the month of December, and it's merely a mental, it's a head trash. It's a mindset of scarcity that there's no business to be had in the month of December. You might have to work harder for it, because there will be people out on vacation. That's true. And there may be people that are, have holiday head and maybe they're less focused. If you double down on filling the top end of your sales pipeline, you will get out and finish that year strong.
I'm curious if there are any stats on like, well, I guess it depends by industry, right? And products. Like what percent of sales are actually made in the fourth quarter? Is it more or less than 25% of the sales for the year?
It's a great question. The goal is obviously to be 25%. You want 25% all 4 quarters. Now, we all know that there are peaks and valleys during the course of a year. It would be ridiculous to think that sales are linear throughout a year. They may vary widely from month to month. In my own business, I know that during the summer months, like June and July, there's oftentimes a dip because you have lots of Americans go on vacation in June and July, right? So decisions aren't being made. And that is true, but that's also a time when, again, I'm doubling down. Same thing in December. I'm doubling down in June and July the same way I would be in Q4.
I've asked you a bunch of questions about this, but is there anything I didn't ask about, Q4 that makes Q4 special or that people should think about differently? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think when you've got a formulaic sales process, you are able to forecast out your sales in a way more accurate manner. And I'll give you an example. So with Sandler, and this is not a Sandler, this is just the Sandler example. The sales process is a 7-step process. And you can accurately predict how your cash flow and how your sales are going to occur by making sure that you're monitoring those 7 steps, right? So, for example, the 7-step process for Sandler is trust, equal business stature is number 2, pain is number 3, budget's number 4, the decision step is number 5. Then once you've got all those things covered, then you present and then you close, right? That's the 7-step process. In your CRM, and my clients are highly efficient and highly accurate when it comes to forecasting because they know, for example, if you're still in the building trust phase, you're not closing that piece of business yet because you still have 6 steps to go. Now, if you're in step number 4, the budget step, you can assign a value to that. And if you did a good job with trust, you did a good job with equal business stature, and you did a great job in pain, what percentage of those sales prospects that you have in that stage number 4, exactly how many you're going to close. And so you can make your CRM work for you by having a very formulaic process to follow. And that takes all of the fantasy that many salespeople inject into their sales pipelines, right? We all know that, oh, this is a sure done deal. And it's not even close. You barely had a conversation with them, right? But you've matched your CRM to your sales process and you integrate the two, then you make your forecasting way more accurate, way more predictable. You can start to smooth out the rough edges, based on your entire sales team.
So, since you mentioned a multi-step sales process, right? Are you saying, of course, it's important to prospect and you'll be developing the whole funnel the whole time, but are you saying in Q4, would someone be wrong in thinking, well, maybe I should just focus on people in the later stages because those are the only ones that have a realistic chance of closing? Would you double down on the ones in the later stage? Because earlier you were saying kind of double down on prospecting, but that's kind of in the beginning stage of the pipeline.
Yeah, well, that depends on if you're prospecting for the rabbits, which you can close quickly. And it depends on the stage that you're in, right? So if you're anywhere past stage 3, pain in the sales process, those should be ones that you could be encouraging to close. Now, you can't force it, and this is a central tenet to how I teach sales. You can't manipulate your prospect into doing anything that they don't want to do. As a matter of fact, you would break trust so quickly the minute you tried to manipulate something. But if someone of the prospects are in, say, stage 4 or 5, you might want to consider reaching out to those groups to see which one of those will close, right? That's where you can have the conversation and say, hey, we've already talked about all these things. You don't have necessarily a budget for it, but what if you had, like, what if you rated another budget? Would it make sense to get started at the end of, or in the middle of November as opposed to waiting until January 1st? You'd get a 6 week head start on progress. You'd have a ton of momentum going into the new year. And so I guess the answer to your question is, yeah, you should look at your sales funnel and the ones that are developed well. You absolutely go crazy with trying to close those. But at the same time, you still have to be prospecting on the front end.
Are there any like specific signals you would look for with these prospects that might make you think that they're ready to close as opposed to having to go to Q1?
Yeah, I think they have to have a visceral pain that they're ready to, they have to have that itch that they have to scratch right now, right? It has to be an emotional pain. It can't be an intellectual one. And what I mean by an emotional pain is that they have to say the words that this means something important to them. It's keeping them up at night. When you hear your prospect is talking about, I'm really stressed about this, when they use the stress words, right? I'm frustrated, I'm worried, I'm angry, I'm annoyed, I'm completely disappointed. You're starting to elicit the emotion out of the prospect. Those are the things that would lead the salesperson to believe, yeah, maybe this is closer than I thought to closing. They have to be both willing and able to do it. And so if the prospect has chalked it up to, what the heck, I'm going to throw everything to the end of the year, there's nothing you can do about that, right? But when you get emotion out of your prospect while you're talking to them about that pain that they're struggling and suffering with, those are ones that have a way higher probability of closing before the end of the year.
I have like two questions here. One is if someone's listening to this right now, it's mid Q4, and they're thinking it's too late for me, what would be like your number one message for them?
No NFL team in their right mind would ever quit midway through the fourth quarter. None. Absolutely. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, led by Baker Mayfield, if they would have quit in the middle of the fourth quarter, they would be 0-5. And so why should you? That's probably my best advice for that.
Awesome. If people wanted to connect with you later, reach out to you, what would be the best way?
Sure. The easiest way to get a hold of me is you can get a hold of me on LinkedIn. If you search Tim Barry, Executive Coach, Timbarry, Executive Coach, all one word, connect with me there. You can also email me at tim.barry@sandler, Sandler, I've got a YouTube channel, a Sandler Training of Fort Worth, where I've got a bunch of free sales training assets. I run on a weekly free 30-minute sales training program every Thursday at 11 a.m. Central. Everybody's welcome to join. It's a free thing. I'm not pushing anybody into buying Sandler Training. You can show up and you can participate. It's a live audience. I do it on Instagram Live and I do it on Zoom. So if you're interested in that, then just email me with your contact info. I'll send you the link and you can show up or not show up just based on what your schedule looks like.
I'll put some links in the show notes for that for people.
Awesome.
Tim, thank you so much.
I appreciate you having me on the show, and I hope that this adds some value to your magnificent audience. It's a battle between your ears, and for salespeople and for sales leaders alike, don't poo-poo the idea that we can sell a lot of stuff in the fourth quarter. There's no reason to have that scarcity mindset. And if you're struggling with that, then by all means, reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to have conversations about how to reset mindset and all that other stuff.
All right. Well, thanks again. I'll talk to you later.